For a while, Americans have lived in a country with three dominant discounters: Walmart, Target, and Kmart. However, the industry was once much more diverse than the big three. One such retailer, serving in the Northeast, outlived most of their competition as a chain with many revolutionary principles, chief among which was a focus on selling high-quality hard goods at down to nearly half the manufacturer's suggested price point, where shopping is always a pleasure. That chain was Caldor. After World War II, the post-war boom gave birth to countless new companies and industries. As a discount pioneer, Caldor predates the big three we see today by over a decade, being founded in 1951, and the first Kmart opened in 1962. Husband and wife, Carl and Dorothy Bennett, brainstormed the concept of a discount department store that focused primarily on name brand products that were high quality, with their main market being middle to upper class. As for the name, it came from the merging of their names, Carl and Dorothy, Caldor. The Bennetts would pool their life savings to open the first store that year in Port Chester, New York. Carl grew up working in his father's small grocery store, where he learned many of the guiding principles that he and his wife would instill in Caldor's ethics. Carl's brother, Harry, would take charge of real estate and would continue to do so into the mid-'80s. This small 9,500 square foot store would see steady growing business and would be replaced by a bigger location 2 years later. A second location was opened in Connecticut with a square footage of 70,000. In 1961, with 6 locations, Caldor Incorporated went public. 2 years later, the company's stock began being traded on the American Stock Exchange. Even though Caldor was an early member of the discount retail industry, they had hard competition from established companies, like Sears, which was touted as the largest company in the world at the time and operated a store directly across from Caldor No. 2. A fire would burn this location to the ground, along with all its merchandise, destroying over half a year's worth of inventory. But Caldor would quickly bounce back and reported sales of nearly 50% above the previous year. With this success, they could substantially expand their savings and offer even more competitive prices. Other discounters wouldn't see such luck, as many of their competitors would go out of business, including Grant's, going out in the mid-'70s, leaving several profitable locations shuttered. Caldor would take over and reopen a handful of these stores after the fact and would see immediate success with them. Along with the big three, they would quickly chip away the specialty stores that had become commonplace, which all fit in with the shopping mall craze, seeing these smaller stores die off as these massive chains ate up all the market share, slowly killing the mom-and-pop tradition of retail that came before, which was slowly fading from American town squares. Throughout the economic booms and busts of the next decade, Caldor remained extremely profitable, and expansion didn't slow despite recessions and slumps. This can be credited to the Bennetts tweaking every aspect of the company in the favor of customer satisfaction, from hiring practices to floor plans, with the stores reorganizing layouts for holiday seasons to managerial hierarchy, having several employees in respective areas of their store to be well-rounded enough to help customers more efficiently, with several department managers to keep daily store operations smooth. By the early 80s, the Bennett team oversaw a 63-store operation, with revenue approaching $700 million yearly. When consumers stopped spending as much as they had in previous years, consolidation was commonplace in retail, yet Caldor remained a strong entity in this changing landscape. In 1981, Caldor Incorporated would be purchased by Associated Dry Goods for $313 million. At this time, ADG operated 162 department stores nationwide, including the well-known Lord & Taylor brand, as well as Sticks, Bear & Fuller and Ellis Ayres, which had its own discount chain, Airway stores. However, the growth potential of Caldor gave the conglomerate a great pillar in discount retail. At the same time, the chain's predecessor and role model, Corvette, would declare bankruptcy, joining the list of companies Caldor had outlived. Carl was given a 3-year contract with ADG, and when his time was up, they attempted to keep him on board, seeing the importance of keeping the Cal in Caldor. He would ultimately reap the benefits of a well-earned retirement, marking the first time Caldor was out of the Bennett family's hands. By this point, Caldor had 100 stores and profits into $1 billion. Without the Bennetts, ADG didn't really have a plan. Up to the middle of the decade, company sales nearly doubled since the acquisition. Its prior growth and history was impressive, but wouldn't be the do-nothing acquisition ADG had expected, and without guidance, the company's performance after this period was disappointing to say the least, as growth slowed to a crawl. They became very disorganized and fell behind their rivals, with their mix of products and in-store tech becoming outdated. So they rolled out plans for an ambitious expansion over the next 10 years, expecting revenue to pass $2 billion and the store count to reach 200 by 1990. In '86, ADG would be acquired by their Midwest-based competitor, known for Famous Bar, Filene's, and the equally successful Venture Stores discount chain, the May Company. In this $2.2 billion merger, Caldor would join Venture in their discount division. I've also made a video on them, which you can view here. Where ADG had focused on a healthy expansion plan, May wanted to strengthen the financial side of things. They would retool nearly every aspect of the stores to fit what they saw as a more profitable, modern concept of discount. They'd cut payroll and would see them downsize the effectiveness of having several department managers, creating area managers. They slimmed down the high-demand display areas for smaller, more compact units that would fit an incredibly diminished amount of merchandise in comparison, forcing the downsized, underpaid employees to restock constantly just to keep up with customers' daily demands, which would only rise. Most stores would switch from an hourly basis of operations to dividing up money for each individual department, while also overhiring and overpaying new management brought in from Venture and competitors, with May's appointed CEO, Dom Clark, and President Mark Balmuth also coming from Venture. As management pay went up, the more staff cuts had to be made, and soon employees had to move from focusing on their own areas and were covering 2 to 3 departments at a time. By the end of this, Caldor barely resembled the customer satisfaction machine the Bennetts had engineered, as May attempted to operate Caldor like a New England version of Venture, which was a starkly different discounter. Clark and Balmuth wanted to focus on soft goods, like clothing, and loosening their grip on hard goods, giving a more balanced mix of products, as they would plan to renovate many Caldor locations, computer systems, and rework store protocol. This got the company back on track, but Kmart and Walmart would begin eating up share in their prime markets, and Caldor would struggle to keep up with their ludicrously low prices. In 1989, May would exit discount completely, focusing on their department stores, and would jettison the 2 discounters, venture into their own private company, and would sell off Caldor to the Odyssey Partners Investment Group in a debt-ridden $537 million leveraged buyout, privatizing it. Clark and Balmuth stayed on board with the company and would expand soft lines and increase the size of the average Caldor unit, and would revamp branding. They would go public again in 1991, reducing Odyssey's debt and giving a window for expansion. They would buy up market share in New York, building a new distribution center. By the mid-90s, Caldor was the 4th biggest department store in the United States. The company's stock more than doubled, and by the end of 1994, more than 80% of their fleet were renovated or newly constructed, with the plan of adding 100 new stores by 1999. However, sales would diminish, and the company wouldn't see this plan realized. Their suppliers got nervous, and shares would fall as the national growth of the Big Three had given them a decent foothold in the Northeast, and it seemed Caldor just couldn't compete with their deep discounts and carnivorous advertising. It's also worth mentioning that many of their new stores were being opened in unprofitable areas, many of such areas leading to theft. The company would file for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection in 1995 when they had 166 stores, $2.75 billion in sales, and 24,000 employees. The bankruptcy would hurt more than just their customers. It also idled several construction projects in Caldor's prominent areas like Queens and the Bronx. The 1990 recession couldn't have helped either, with the dollar now worth less than ever before. The rapid decline of the company surprised many. Caldor would find themselves in a bind with creditors, and they would cut off deliveries as the company owed them more and more money, leading the stores to struggle filling high-demand products and creating a rain check culture that a former employee described as getting so frequent that, quote, you could wallpaper a room with all the rain checks you would receive. So this became the company image. Their liberal return policy gave dangerously bendable allowance on what could be returned, leading some customers to take big-ticket items directly off the shelves and walk to the front desk to return it without having spent any money. And most of the time, they got a refund for their non-existent purchases. And shortage initiatives simply weren't sophisticated enough to deal with this new exodus of merchandise. By the end of '97, they operated 157 stores in 10 states. Walmart alone had 3,000 stores and $96.3 billion in sales compared to Caldor's $2.75 billion. Rumors of another bankruptcy were looming, and Caldor shares began dropping again. The company showed the worst deficit in its history and closed about a dozen stores. Their former sister chain, Venture, would go bankrupt the next year after a similar chain of events. Caldor would hold out until 1999, but its slow financial progress led them to enter Chapter 7 bankruptcy, under which the chain was forced to liquidate all operations. By April that year, Caldor had sold off all their merchandise and would close their last store, ironically, in May. Many of their employees stayed on with the bankruptcy, but ultimately the over 20,000 people lost their jobs. Their stores were split between the big three, and many of their New York locations were taken over by Kohl's. Like we saw with Venture, rapid expansion out of May's umbrella was dangerous and didn't help their case. But either way, there just wasn't enough room for a number 4. The frequent management changes hurt their public image when it came to policy and growth strategy. When Associated bought them out, discount was a very different industry than it had become by the 90s. Through the May acquisition and later being spun off with Odyssey, they left a market with old competitors and were thrown at the feet of the giants that were Walmart, Target, and Kmart. They got big and beat them up. All the warmth that employees had become accustomed to from middle and upper management had gone cold when May reorganized them. It became all about mergers and expansion, many stores being opened very closely together, frequently stealing each other's traffic. When Carl retired and Caldor ceased to be a family-ran company, their demise was inevitable. Corporate spending, reorganization, and consistent buyouts destroyed whatever they had against other competitors, and they became just like every other could have been.